friend and everyone's friend, United States Senator Ben Cardin. This morning, what we'd like to do is really just give brief information about the process, what to be expected, and how we can go about and getting everything done. We do have some people online. They are coming on board. They are hold on one second. Some are trying to still log on as we speak. If we could ask that everyone, when you do have a question, we will want the question be brief, but also if you have additional questions, our emails are in the chat room for everyone to go to do so. Uh, I will get off at this point and let Mr. Mike Thomas come on. Mike is our appropriations guru. He will assist you and tell you what we can do, what we can't do. We like projects that's a target to those individuals that are challenged in our community. We like those projects. And we also encourage you not only to meet with the office of United States Senator Cardin, but also with United States Senator Chris Van Hollen's office, as well as your congressman. Thank you. At this point, I'm going to have to look at some emails because some people are still trying to log in and they're having problems. Mike, it's on you.
Sure. Thanks, Jerome. Liz and I are kind of excited to be able to talk to you all today. For those of you that don't know, we are kind of the appropriations team for Senator Cardin. We're going to be going over a couple different things here on kind of the basics as to what an earmark is, the differences between how the House and the Senate look at earmarks, and then kind of offering strategies on how to be the most effective advocate for your projects, as well as kind of briefly going over the different types of categories of funding that are eligible. For those of you that might have seen kind of our earmark guide, we have produced an updated FY24 earmark guide. If you saw last year's version, this gets into a little bit greater detail this year on the specific information you have to provide for different categories of funding, as well as giving kind of the funding range we've seen for earmarks awarded to say, for construction projects, we've seen kind of a range between this and that, kind of giving that better balance as to, what you might be looking for from an earmark. We will note that this guide was created with the information provided to us by the Appropriations Committee for the FY23 earmarks. They might change it. They might change some of the requirements for us, once we kind of get closer towards the spring period. I will also say, too, that we know that the incoming House majority, they want to retain earmarks, but they have talked about kind of changing the eligibility requirements, what earmark categories we can go after. We will kind of cross that bridge once we get there from them. But Senator Cardin, we're going to be able to start this today, kind of start hearing from you as to what your projects are, what you're interested in looking at, and seeing how we can help to kind of put your applications into shape. So now I'll kind of turn it over to Lindsay to kind of give us that explanation as to what earmarks actually are.
Thank you. Thanks, Mike. Good morning, everyone. We're glad you're here. So some of you probably are already familiar with the earmark process, have been through it before, maybe have even gotten funding from us before, which is fantastic, but we're sure there are some new faces in the audience. We want to make sure you actually know what this crazy thing called earmarks even is. So congressionally directed spending is what it is called in the Senate, and community project funding is what it's called in the House, but those are both just terms to refer to earmarks, and that's what we'll kind of call them throughout the rest of this meeting and throughout the process while you're applying. They are a one-time use of funds. They have to be generally allocated within the fiscal year that they're provided. They're not intended to be a piece of a fundraiser that you're going to use 5 years down the road. There are instances in which you can use the funding kind of, you start it within the fiscal year that it's allocated to you, and it can be used for a few years after as, you get the project going and you're finishing up the projects. But it really is meant to be used now when it is given, as opposed to something that, you add to a pot of money to be used in the future. In that same breath, it's also not meant to be used for something that occurred in the past. So it's not meant to reimburse. It's supposed to be something that you're going to be actively using. Another thing, earmarks do not affect your ability to apply for federally awarded grants. It's not an either-or situation. Senator Cardin recognizes that all of your nonprofits are doing fantastic work in the state of Maryland, and he does not see it as greedy to be asking for money for the projects that you need to have funded. So we really urge you to, take advantage of every opportunity you have to request funding from the federal government. And then finally, the Appropriations Committee will prioritize awarding funding for projects that are sustainable, meaning that when the earmark money runs out, the project is still going to be there. So whether that be a piece of infrastructure or a program that you're starting, for example, an after-school program, we want to make sure that it is a sustainable project and it's going to exist much longer than the earmark is. So that's kind of the brief overview of what earmarks actually are. And now Mike's going to give you the differences between House and Senate rules when it comes to applying to earmarks.
Sure. The vast majority of the requirements for earmarks are going to be the same, but there are some slight differences that we want to highlight. First, in the House, members are limited to submitting 15 total earmark requests. In the Senate, we don't have that hard cap of the number of requests we can submit, but how our subcommittees look at funding, we can only get a certain amount of funding for construction projects or for healthcare projects. So we kind of have to work with you and strategize on how to be effectively requesting funding for your projects. We can generally earmark the same accounts. However, there are some that are only available to the Senate and some that are only available to the House. So one of the things, Jerome has kind of talked about this already. We're going to continue to emphasize if you're asking for an earmark at all, make sure to reach out to Senator Cardin, Senator Van Hollen, and your House members. Let us know about all the projects you're requesting funding for. You don't need to go just to one member or another. Make sure to ask us all because you may literally be asking us for something to do that we don't have the capacity to do, kind of under our earmark rules. In the House, they have a hard requirement that you have to submit at least 2 letters of support for the project. The Senate doesn't have this requirement, but it's always helpful to be able to see those to be able to show kind of the widespread community support for your project. We also operate on slightly different timelines. Sometimes the House will go ahead, they will set deadlines for submission of requests before the president's budget has been released or very shortly after that. The Senate, usually goes a little bit later than that, so we wait for the president's budget released, and then we kind of set our timelines. So you may see a difference in timeline as to when you have to submit projects for your House member and for the senators. Senators Cardin and Van Hollen work together to make sure that we have the same application, we're asking the same questions, we have the same application deadline day. But there will be. We just recommend that you kind of check in with your House members as to what their deadlines are going to be. Jerome, Lindsay, and I will make sure that, as soon as we have the application deadline date, we'll be emailing you kind of the application form, letting you know the date as many times as possible. So you kind of have that as far in advance as you can. Looking at process, we want today's meeting to be the start of our conversation and think about kind of things for FY24. Take time to kind of think about the information we're going to provide you today. Also looking at our earmark guide. I know, kind of Lindsay has put the link to that in the chat. Jerome's been sending that around to kind of think about, the categories of funding you might be eligible for, as well as kind of the ranges that may be available to you. Take that time, put together your kind of thoughts, and then feel free to reach out to us with an email to say you want to request kind of a one-on-one meeting. It's very helpful if we can kind of get that paragraph-like description as to what you're looking to do, because then we can kind of quickly go through and be able to determine if it's eligible or if it's not, how it can be helpful to you. Our official season really kicks off, once the president's budget is released in the Senate. We anticipate that the president will be able to release his budget kind of in early March, mid-February to early March. With that, the Senate Appropriations Committee kind of sets our deadline shortly thereafter. So we would anticipate that you have to submit your earmark request to us for consideration by either the end of March or early April. Again, that timeline may change depending on when the president's budget is released, but we will let you know. But that's kind of a good guesstimate as to the timeline that we're thinking about. Once you submit your request to the senator, he and the other members of the delegation will kind of take those requests and decide which ones to advance to the Appropriations Committee for consideration of funding. We can't fund everything, but we want to make sure to be as successful as we can and helping out as best we can. But that's something that the members decide which ones to advance to the committee. Once the Appropriations Committee actually has those on hand, they will take them to the federal agencies that you're requesting funding from and actually go to them and kind of get a clarification from them. Is this something that's eligible for funding? If I'm looking to kind of do construction of the health facility, is this something that the Health Services Administration can actually work on? Once the administration has kind of given them that feedback on if it's eligible or not, then the Appropriations Committee actually decides which earmarks to fund. The House will generally announce which earmarks they're going to fund, and between June and July. The Senate, again, is a little bit later. We usually see our earmarks kind of released in either the mid to late August period. Once the House and the Senate have released the information on what is going to be what is recommended for funding, then we have to go through and enact and end of year omnibus appropriations bill that kind of finalizes everything for the year. We typically get that done in very late December. Once the appropriations bill has been signed into law, kind of your earmark is kind of at the federal agencies. The federal agencies will then kind of reach out to you with the content information that you provided, and start to kind of work with you in the process of awarding funds. There is a short application period that you have kind of afterwards. Again, we post the application links in our earmark guide for once you receive the funding, just to kind of give you an idea as to the reporting requirements and what it would look like. It's very similar if you've gotten any federal earmarks in the past to the type of projects you've been getting in the past. So if you've gotten health money before, it's going to be the same reporting requirements that you've gotten for previous health money in the past. So that's kind of the initial process. I'll turn it over to Lindsay for kind of the information we would need from you to actually submit a request.
Yeah, and I've been kind of adding recently to Mike's piece on that. In the earmark guide, there is a page that has the entire kind of schedule for what the FY 23-24 earmarks looks like. Would really recommend using that page while you're thinking about things. I know it kind of helps me get it all in order when there's, a calendar year and a fiscal year kind of going on at the same time. So now outline the requirements that you're going to all be required to submit when we send that application link around. The application link is going to lead you to a portal that's going to ask you for very specific information for the requests that you're making, but it's also going to ask for 4 general things that every single nonprofit and community organization are going to need to list. The first thing is the description of your project. We call this kind of the elevator pitch. Very briefly, how are you going to use the earmark dollars? Who in the community is it going to serve? And why is the funding needed? This will be also the basis that we use as a public description. So when you go to the website that we linked in the comment section, that website has kind of all of the earmarks that we've applied for in the past 2 years that you can kind of read through to kind of get an idea of what you're thinking of. And the text that you're going to see there is the elevator pitch text that we're going to be asking from each of you in the application. The second thing is a budget that outlines how your funds are going to be spent. So we literally need to know exactly where the money is going to be going. So say you're starting a new park, what part of the piece is going to be used for the basketball court, what part is going to be used to, purchase land, those sorts of things. And we need to know every single piece of that information. The more details we have, the better, because it's possible we might not be able to do something and we can do something else. And the whole goal here is to get you as much money as we can to fund your projects within the community. So the more information we have, the better we can sit down and say, oh, well, we might not actually be able to fund the land, but we might be able to fund the basketball court, the picnic tables, those sorts of things. So the more information we have, the better. The third thing we're going to be asking for is project financing from non-federal sources. So if your money isn't coming 100% from the earmark, we also need to know where else it's coming from. Is it coming from the state government? Is it coming from fundraisers that you've been doing in the community? Does your nonprofit have a budget that it's going to be going to as well? All the funding that's not coming from the earmark, we need to know about. This is also fantastic because it also illustrates general community support. So the House is going to ask you for those 2 letters, and we as the Senate don't require those. They're fantastic if you have them, but this also kind of does that same thing, right? If you have fundraisers, we can see, oh, great, fantastic. The community is behind this project and they're excited about it. And then the fourth and final thing that you're going to be asked for when you get that application link is a project timeline, which is very basically, when are you going to start the project if you receive the funding, and when do you anticipate the project finishing? The committee is going to prioritize funding things that begin in the fiscal year, like we talked about earlier. So make sure you're thinking about when you're getting your applications ready and preparing what projects you want to apply for right now, what can you actually use within FY24? All right, and I think we'll stop for questions about anything we just had. So feel free to use the raise the hand feature, or to also type in the chat if you have a question.
And we've got a lot of callers. How do they raise their hand for questions?
That is a fantastic question. I don't know if that feature exists on the phone call option. They should still be able to type into the chat. Also, if you are a caller and you don't have the feature to do those things, feel free to email us. You can't see the email, but the email would be mdlocal oh yeah, they can raise their hands. That's what I thought. But if you can't, mdlocal@cardin.senate.gov, and we'll get to the emails after the meeting. But we'll start with hands. So caller 2403 ending in 37, you are first.
My name is Anthony Moore, and I pastor a church called Carolina Missionary Baptist Church. I was... Hello?
We can hear you.
We're still here.
We can hear
Okay,
you.
I'm sorry. It's still talking to me. It's still talking to me. I'm sorry. So I want to make sure that I missed the first 5 minutes. So let me just make sure I'm clear. What I did have is that you gave the 4 things that we need. One is the description of the project, the budget, the project financing, if there's funds that's coming from the outside. And then the 4th thing was the project timeline. Am I correct?
Correct.
Okay, now the link that you were referencing, how will I ascertain that link? Maybe I missed that portion. Just forgive me for asking the question, if I'm being redundant.
No, you're fine. So the link will be mailed out once we get kind of our go ahead from the president's budget and things. We'll email the links out to you. So Jerome, Mike, and I will make sure that the link to the application is received by all of the organizations on this call.
We also post this on our website. It's kind of one of the main headers. So when you go to our website, you'll be able to see, application link is live. Click here. So it's kind of readily available as best as we can.
Okay. I also wanted to make you aware that it's star 3 for those who are on the call. If they wanted to raise their hands, that's what they're asking us to do in order to be recognized.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You can put me back.
Great.
We'll go to Greg now.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. We're both unmuting at the same time.
Yep.
Yes.
Hi. Can you just give me a sense of the range of submissions that you get, like just in terms of dollars, budget, but just as well as the magnitude, the number of submissions you get?
For FY22, we had about 170 total requests. For FY23, the one that we won right now, we had about 500. But this has begun, with things we had statewide. We do try and process as much as we can. Sometimes, we might rely on one of our House members to take the lead on something, or Senator Van Hollen. But it is still a competitive process. Don't feel like you're going to be crowded out. We also try to make sure too that we have seen work where we've done to secure applications and to get people best in shape. They've gotten bond bills sometimes for that same project. So we really do try and work with you to make sure that we're being as helpful as we can. Even if it's something that you might be applying to a competitively awarded grant down the road, or we can't do it through an earmark, but there might be hey, there's infrastructure money for what you're looking to do. We're more than happy to kind of make those connections for you.
So thank you for that.
Yep. Oh, and the range of funds you said, it depends on what category of funding you're looking at. So there's more money for construction projects than there is for programming. But if you go through our earmark guide for each of the different categories of funding, we have listed out, for the past 2 fiscal years, here's the range we saw. Sometimes, for some programs we saw, requests as low as $83,000 get funded, others, kind of up to $5 million. But it's all kind of, that information is kind of available in the guide.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yep.
Miss Dina? Miss Dina Wayne. Just kidding. Maybe P. Wallace. Just kidding. Your hand is on the other one.
Hi, good
Okay,
morning,
Ms. Wallace,
everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good morning. You mentioned earlier that that you would do partial, to be very descriptive about your project, because you may be able to fund part of it, if not all of it. Now, our project is twofold. It's a capital build and renovation, and it also is some behavioral health programming services. Should I do 2 separate asks, or should I just be very detailed in the description and in the budget as to what's going to cover what, a dollar amount will cover what?
So for this project, we would have to do 2 separate earmark requests. The funding for capital projects, that comes through HRSA. The funding for the behavioral health side, for the programming side, we need to hire more counselors. That comes through SAMHSA. So because it's coming through 2 different federal agencies, we have to submit 2 different earmark requests. And we can work with you on that. So if you have one joint application, the committee would reject that and say we can't do this. But if you need to submit 2 separate ones, we're happy to break that out, because that the behavioral health piece would be new for what you submitted in the past.
Fabulous. Thank you very much.
Yep. And we'll look at kind of the questions. Neil, you can kind of put the overhead costs in, overhead or indirect. I think generally if you're looking for like 20% or 25%, that's kind of the committee might start to question, what else are you looking on this for? But we have seen applications been successful in getting funding for 10%, 15% of the funding. That's more on a case by case basis, but it's also kind of indicative of each of the different federal agencies will have different rules on that. So if you can look at their application links for other projects, and kind of based a similar percentage overhead cost based off of that. Sandy, your question on if you got a program in FY23, kind of the point here about yes, you can ask for the same project if you're showing that it's expanded or improved. So let's say I am now in kind of on the west side of the town. Now I need to go to now I want to move my project to east side. That is perfectly acceptable. Or we've got a program where we currently have 100 kids in our after school program. We want to take it to 200 now. That shows that you're kind of expanding what you're doing right now. The prohibition is really more on we have this program we're running right now. We don't want to have to do fundraising this year. Can you fund us kind of the operational costs? That's something we can't do. And then kind of the other part of that question, we do recognize we are going to get you the earmark money about halfway through the federal fiscal year. The committee prioritizes funds, prioritizes awarding funding for projects that you can show that the vast majority of it would be spent kind of in that within that federal fiscal year, which ends September 30, 2024. But if you need to extend that out a little bit, a year or two, that's perfectly fine. And then kind of Naya, the question on multiple applications. Yes, you can submit multiple applications. If you're going to do that, make sure to send them all, each of them to all the members. But we can show you that. We would ask though that you would kind of set up a one-on-one meeting with us. We can work with you. You may be submitting multiple different earmark requests that actually would kind of compete directly against each other, and we can kind of advise you on that to say, if you're going to be asking for things like this, you've really got to prioritize, one over the other because they're in direct competition for funding. We'll take a pause for questions here. We'll kind of now chug through the different categories of funding that are eligible and then kind of open it back up to questions again. So kind of there's a couple different major buckets we can look at. And again, all the information I'm going to present now is available in greater detail in the earmark guide. We just want to kind of use this as a conversation starter. The biggest thing we can look at is for the construction or rehabilitation of community infrastructure. What we can do is we can fund projects through the Community Development Block Grant Program. So instead of having to go to the city or the county to kind of get authorization for CDBG construction projects, we can earmark that funding directly for your organizations. This can be used for renovation of existing facilities, construction of new ones, or can be used for land acquisition or property acquisition costs. You do have to show that the primary beneficiary of the project is going to be for low to moderate income individuals. And you can do that by either showing kind of the zip code you're trying to serve or kind of the surrounding communities, who you think you're going to pull people in from. We also have funding available to us for preservation projects under the Historic Preservation Fund. This looks at funding renovation of facilities that are kind of on the National Historic Registrar. I know we've gotten some for kind of the Upton Mansion restoration, kind of for charities, other projects that are kind of of similar age. We can fund the renovation of those facilities. There is a hard like $500,000 cap. But again, it's that subsection of funds is only available to those that have their facilities on the National Historic Registrar. The Department of Energy also has funding available to us for kind of renewable or clean energy projects. I know Goucher College got money for installation of solar panels. So we can look at some of these things. If you've got an aging infrastructure within your facilities, we can look to help kind of improve that kind of through different renewable energy projects. Under the transportation side, we can look at funding things under the Transportation Alternatives Program from the Highway Bill. What this can look at, this funds a lot of different, activities for expanding parks, pedestrian access. So if you have something that you're trying to look at to kind of expand the ability for people to get to your facility or get to, kind of renovate that park that your communities are trying to work on, we can help fund activities like that. We do have to kind of work with maybe the governmental entities that might actually be responsible for it. That's something we can decide to partner on if you're trying to look for things like that. In the criminal justice space, there's funding available to us at the Burn JAG program. Burn JAG does a lot of police officer trainings, but we also can use it for community violence prevention programs, or kind of mental health for officers. We've seen a lot of that work and being able to get a lot of these funds kind of for the past couple of fiscal years, kind of with different programs in the city. I know Roqua's gotten funding like this, Living Classrooms, I think. Kind of in the healthcare space, there's also funding available to us for both construction of health facilities as well as actually funding direct medical care. For the health facilities construction equipment account, we can look to fund the restoration or construction of health facilities that provide direct medical care. We can also do large capital equipment purchases. I want to have a mobile van where I can take it out to individuals who are kind of shut in their communities. I need that van to be able to get out to them. We can fund things like that. We can also fund things from SAMHSA. This is a Substance Use Mental Health Service Administration. Here, we can fund projects under mental health, substance use treatment, and substance use prevention. We've seen a lot of earmarks kind of in this category, used for crisis stabilization centers, helping out with additional mental health needs. We've got a great telemedicine practice going right now. I need to hire more people to actually answer answer those phone calls. We can fund activities through there. For our vulnerable populations, for seniors and children, we have funding available to us for the Administration for Community Living, ACL, for their Aging and Disability Services program. If you run a senior center or if you're kind of working with senior populations, we can hire additional staff for the center facility, provide training to them to kind of get them engaged with different needs, or hire case managers to be able to work with the seniors and kind of getting them hooked up with additional services. The Administration for Children and Families, also ACF, also has kind of like to call it kind of the social worker account. Let's make sure to kind of get communities, be stabilized, get them connected with funding for additional, federal, state, local resources, help them to become self-sufficient. That's kind of the work that we can kind of do under that. Kind of the last, kind of 3 buckets of categories of funding that we have. We can earmark funding from the Small Business Administration. We can't provide you with funding to say you want to run a Shark Tank program and kind of award capital funding to say there's a great new entrepreneur, we want to help give them funding. But what we can do is that we can provide your organizations with funding to do trainings for small businesses and entrepreneurs. Kind of how to be in the business of being in business. That's the type of activity that we can fund through there. We can also look at workforce development needs. You're trying to get individuals kind of you kind of see a need for you've got a large employer that you want to work with kind of in the community. How do we get individuals kind of trained up to be able to go into those jobs? We can help you create programs through the Department of Labor that actually kind of create that pipeline where people can kind of get that access to that certification. That might be able to take them kind of on a regional basis or kind of work with direct employers. The last kind of flexibility of funding that we have, it's from the Department of Education. We can earmark funding under kind of K through 12 activities. This includes both before school, after school, and summer programs, as well as kind of in the higher education and rehabilitation services space for working with children with special needs. We can do things like if you've got an after school program or something that you're trying to take kids that might not be thinking about college and kind of get them up and thinking about it and kind of get into it. We can do things to enhance the curriculum that you're using, hire additional staffing, additional funding to help more kids go through the programs, and some small equipment purchases, like computers, laptops, things like that. So that's kind of the brief overview as to what we can do. Again, everything that we just went through, is available in greater detail in our earmark guide. But now, kind of happy to open up for questions again before we can kind of get into the strategies on how to be successful. Sandy, your question on kind of leasing. Unfortunately, the CDBG dollars, we can only use those for acquisition. So we can't use it for kind of leasing space. It has to be used for the acquisition costs. So if you want to buy it, we can help you with that. We can't do anything on the kind of paying rent or lease space. Connor, it's just not right now. I know kind of the Maryland Nonprofit Network tried to kind of ask for a similar earmark kind of with FY22. It was rejected at that time by the committee. I really wanted to make another run at that this year. I know that Senator Van Hollen is kind of the chairman of the committee now that kind of awards these type of earmarks. Mr. Hoyer in the House is also kind of going to be the new person that does this on the House side as well. This is something I really want to take another look at. If you have a package of what you're looking to do, we can take that to the committee over the next couple of weeks and kind of figure out what they would want to do with that. While we're thinking of additional questions, I'm happy to kind of run through the different strategies or tips we've seen on, how to be successful. Some of these are based on things we've seen from other applications, as well as the feedback we've gotten from committee on, things we've had to cure, kind of in earmarks that we have gotten funding for. I know Jerome has talked about this. Please, make sure if you're going to reach out to us, for an earmark, make sure to reach out to Mr. Van Hall and whoever your House members are as well. Members want to be helpful. We can't do that unless we hear from you. We do not see this as being greedy. If you submit, all 3 earmark requests you have to all 3 members, it is illustrating the full scope of your needs. So please feel free to reach out to us. We want to be helpful. If you are going to submit multiple earmark requests, please make sure to prioritize them for us. Again, like I talked about earlier, where you might be submitting multiple requests, whereas in the Senate, they directly compete against each other. We won't know which one is your top priority unless you tell us that yourself. So if you're going to submit multiple earmark requests, please make sure to prioritize them. If you are asking for a larger request, kind of you're looking through the earmark guide and you see that, the type of category I'm looking for, I'm kind of on the higher end of that scale. Please make sure to indicate in your application if a smaller amount of funding would still be helpful to you. The committee often will want to be helpful. They can sometimes come to us and say, somebody, your requester asked for $1 million, we can't do as much, if maybe we give them half, is that still helpful? We need to hear from you if that is. It's hard for us to understand, if you say, I need to hire additional staff, can you hire half a person? That's information we'll need from you. For things like this, it's, if you got a construction project, if you can tell us that, if you give me $2 million, I can do phases 1 and 2. If you can only give me $1 million, I can do phase 1, but it's still at least helpful. That's the type of information that they would need. For programming, such as I need additional counselors, or I need, to hire additional staff or have kids to go through my program. If you almost have a per program participant cost ratio, that's very easy for the community to understand scale, to say that if we can only give you maybe 3/4 or half, we can still be helpful. It can still serve a number of kids. Also, kind of, with the new Congress we're going to have coming in, we have new congressional districts. I know, so kind of the members you may have been asking for earmarks for in the past, they may have changed. Congressman Otume kind of has a large percentage of the city now. So, we don't have kind of, Mr. Sarbanes or Mr. Ruppersberger's ability to kind of help us out as much. So would recommend that you start kind of reaching out to their office, to, your new congressional representative now, to kind of get in on their ear and let them know kind of what your priorities are, the types of communities that you serve and what your mission is. So that way, when you do start sending that earmark request to them, they understand who you are, the type of work you're doing, and it's kind of easier for them to understand, how to be helpful. If this is, if they've already heard from you. And you can do that both with the member, their legislative staff, as well as their field staff, to kind of get that understanding. We also recognize too, unfortunately, the earmark application process for us, it's also the height of the General Assembly session. You might be thick in the weeds of kind of submitting bond bill applications at the same time. To kind of meet that House requirement to have those letters of recommendation, if you've gotten someone that's submitted a bond bill for you, ask them to flip a letter of recommendation to us. It's relatively easy for them to do that. They've already kind of bought it in the project. But just understand, it should be start working on this letters of recommendation now for what you're thinking about, because they do take a little bit of lead time to get in. And then we'll kind of pause for Greg's question here. Okay, go ahead.
Great, thank you. Can we include IT and technology projects that serve community organizations, underserved, and the like?
It depends on what earmark account you're looking at, but sometimes that can be one of those like budget items. I know we've gotten funding for other for Department of Education things. We say we need cell phones to be able to, make sure we can call kids' families and things like that to come pick them up. Smaller costs like that are fine, but we can't do a $20,000 server or something like that. Usually it has to be, you have to be able to show that it's for the direct benefit of the program participants. So sometimes we recognize that. Sometimes it's a little harder to get it through the committees, though.
Yep.
Kind of our last 2 points we have, unfortunately, earmark funding is kind of siloed. I know Patrice kind of talked about this with what she's looking to do, both on the, I want to build the building and then I want to staff it with people. The federal agencies can only do what they're used to doing. The Department of Ed can only pay for the, for the kids programs. It can't pay for the construction of facilities. So when you submit an application to us, we might actually have to recommend to you that you break it out into multiple earmark applications. That's perfectly fine if you do that. But here, just understand too that submitting one application for different projects or different priorities, we may have to break that out in order to be able to advance it to the committee. And kind of the last thing, we want to be helpful. Please feel free to call on Jerome, Lindsay, and I. I know we did, about 170 kind of one-on-one sessions last year. We were more than happy to kind of start these conversations. Get to understand your project. Be able to go through and offer red line comments on, hey, in your application, you might want to recommend this. It's what we see in the committee kind of very interested in. We want to make sure that your applications are the best possible chance to be successful, even if that's something that another member decides to be the kind of the leader on that one. We want to be helpful to you, so please feel free to call on us. So kind of that's the end of our formal presentation, and kind of happy to sit here and answer any questions you guys might have.
Mike, do you want to do the one? Oh, just kidding. I think she's also the one who has her hand raised. Sandy, coming to you.
Okay.
All right.
Yes, I just wanted to ask, can you partner with another nonprofit agency and combine with your earmark request?
You can partner with them. Unfortunately, only one entity is allowed to be named as the recipient of funds. So you kind of have to have one person might be the lead contractor on this to say that I will take the legal responsibility of accepting the federal fundings, doing the reporting requirements. But you can indicate in your application that we intend to partner with, an additional nonprofit organization that might, they can cover one part of the city and we can cover another part. So clearly, we can understand, we will be able to understand as the applicant what you're looking to do, but you have to decide amongst yourselves, who will be the lead applicant to actually receive that money.
Thank you.
Yep. Unfortunately, we are not recording this conversation. We're happy to answer any additional questions through the, and Lindsay can post again kind of our information in the chat. A lot of the information we've provided too is available in the earmark guide as well. That kind of is now available, kind of through the chat again.
Looks like no further questions.
Must have had a couple of years of doing this together, right? So we're all kind of refreshed and understand what to do now.
Oh, we have one.
Okay.
All right, caller with the phone number ending in 87. 4106 ending in 87. You're unmuted.
Go ahead.
Yes, there's so much information here. My head is spinning. Where can I find the earmark guide?
If you can look at our chat feature right now, we have a PDF there.
See, I'm on the phone, so
Okay.
I can't see your chat feature.
It's okay. In the email that Jerome emailed out, he also should have added the link to, or actually the PDF to it. So you should also have it in that original email from Jerome.
It's also available on our earmark on our Senator Cardin's website. If you go to cardin.senate.gov, kind of in the about section, we have a whole thing called earmarks that has all the links to kind of the nonprofit earmark guide, links to every single earmark we submitted in FY22 and FY23. You can look at for ideas as to what other people are looking at. And this is also where we'll be posting kind of the application website once it becomes available kind of in the spring period.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, looks like we tapped out on questions. Jerome, do you want to kind of end us here? Go ahead, Jerome.
Okay, thank you, Lindsay. As we had indicated earlier, and we cannot stress that you must consider also asking your congressman as well as Senator Chris Van Hollen as well. And like Mike has indicated, we may not be the one to assist you directly getting a earmark, but we have worked closely with individuals and nonprofits in the past who we was not directly did not directly receive a earmark from Senator Cardin, but it was our efforts to put them in the position for another congressional member to allow them to help them. Therefore, I must say that, as like Mike said earlier, we had over 100 and some meetings that we did last year. and we probably would do the same amount this year. I know some people have had difficulties in logging on this morning, but we will still be able to reach you and send you additional information out regarding our process, the guide, and other information. As we have said always throughout this conversation, we are always available to assist you. You have our emails, our phone numbers, and we will look forward to working with you to meet your goals and objectives as you seek to serve the communities that you represent. Thank you.
Thanks all. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. I'll stay on just for a moment if anyone needs to copy the information from the chat again. There it is. And for those on the phone, the link, the guide would be in Jerome's first email, and you can find it on the website. And if you're interested in scheduling a one-on-one, you have Jerome's email, and he's happy to get you forwarded to Mike and I. So we're excited to hear from you all.